Thank you. So, if you haven't heard before, this is the most demystifying session of the entire IoT track. But because we have a limited time, only 15 minutes, for whatever reason, the organizer decided that's going to be 15 minutes, we have completely taped this whole session. And this gentleman are going to come there, lip sync it, we are going to play the tape. No, that's a joke, sorry. So I'm going to invite my two esteemed panelists here that I'm going to do a little bit of fireside chat. There's no fire here, but that's how the session is named. First of all, John Cameron, who's the general manager for Trimble's Field Services Division. You can look up the profiles. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. And Mike McCormick, who is from Salesforce. A luminary in IoT space, and also is part of the customer futures group within Peter Schwartz group within Salesforce, right, Mike? Hi. Okay. So, all right. So, so we're going to start this session with a couple of questions that I'm going to ask this gentleman here, and then we'll open it up for your questions as well. So, let me start with you, John. I know Trimble is probably the company that most people don't know, yet has been in the industrial or enterprise, as I call it, enterprise IoT space for a long time. You track about upwards of 1 million assets in the field, and I know you manage a significant part of those assets. So given the spectrum of businesses that Trimble is involved in, how does Trimble view IoT? As a business area.
Thank you, Prakash. Does this sound okay?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, great. Trimble is transforming the way the world works. Trimble started out as a supplier of rugged sensors, particularly GPS, and they have, can you hear me?
I know somebody said that.
Oh, okay. And we've been adding wireless communications, modeling, and more importantly now, data analytics. So the Internet of Things is providing the access to the data that drives this transformation of how the world works at a rate that was previously inconceivable. Some examples of how different Trimble businesses are using IoT technology would include agriculture, where we have cameras and sensors on the agricultural equipment, as well as in the field and in the ground itself, measuring moisture and soil content, which allows the Trimble Connected Farm solution to prescribe the correct amount of raw materials, seed, fertilizer, pesticides, and all of this can be delivered in a prescriptive manner to the specific locations where it's needed most. In this way, the farmers actually generate higher crop yields with using less raw material. And Trimble Construction is another area where heavy pieces of capital equipment are filled with sensors that are measuring all aspects of the health of the equipment and how it's used. This data is used to drive the productivity of the job, as well as being fed back to the factory so that the engineers can use this information in an aggregated way to improve the design of next generation equipment in terms of productivity, lower cost of ownership. Transportation and logistics, these 18-wheel trucks you see going down the freeways, they're filled with sensors. They're measuring the location of the vehicle, not only where it is on the map, but where it is in the lane. And what's the fuel consumption, tire pressure, temperature of the load. All of this information is brought together to a solution that helps ensure that the driver is safer, that the productivity of the truck is prolonged, more productive hours on the road, and when maintenance is required, that it's done in a shortened and efficient manner. Real estate and workspace solutions, light, motion, temperature sensors, all of this information helps us determine how a building is utilized. This helps us in capacity planning, as well as enabling our customers to lower the cost of energy. Asset utilization, so low-cost sensors that can sense motion and location are enabling mission critical or expensive assets to be tracked and their utilization understood, and also assisting with theft recovery and prevention. And finally, some of our high precision GPS solutions have been integrated with inertial sensors to provide an SDI, a simple to use kit for systems integrators that want to develop their own applications in precision motion control for indoors and outdoors, as well as including flight control algorithms that are built in. So in a way, we're happy to enable our competitors too.
So I think, if nothing, if we didn't demystify IoT, we at least demystify Trimble, right? And I was just talking about that range of, so just taking off of that theme there, Mike, I'm sure Trimble has its own platforms that they use to build the IoT solutions. And you hear a lot of new platforms. In every conference that I go to, I see another new vendor with a platform offering. So can you kind of demystify that? What are the challenges in building a true IoT platform in terms of scalability, in terms of reliability? And in one of the previous sessions, talked about security. Maybe you could just throw some light into that.
Yeah, I was actually just talking with Adam Bosworth, the head of Salesforce's IoT, just the other day about this. He and I had built a system in 2002 that dealt with a lot of similar problems. And he's building the Thunder product at Salesforce. And there are really three main challenges that everyone has to face when they try to build a framework like this. And especially now that the hardware is able to support so much throughput, things are getting very interesting. The first problem is that throughput. It's being able to scale. When you have all these endpoints producing hundreds of data events per second, it can be really challenging to handle all that in a meaningful and contextual way. The second thing is creating a developer experience, making it intuitive for developers to actually generate rules about how the system should work, and pushing that even down to the end user, the consumer of this information or consuming device, to be able to know or make decisions on what to do given the state of the system as a whole. And the last thing that I think is most interesting, you solve the scale problem and you can move data around, and we're getting pretty good at that. Things like Kafka and Spark and Hadoop, all these things on the back end. But the real challenge at this point is to move the intelligence to different points in the system. Right now in the cloud, you have, at the very highest level, the most information. You have not only information about the user, but you can get information about the context, where the user is operating and what's happening around the user. And the problem, the great power of that, of course, is you're at the top and you know everything, but the problem is that you're at the top, and that is a bottleneck. And an example of one way that I addressed this in a technology I wrote called Locus Pocus was an adaptive filtering engine. We had to track Bluetooth-enabled tools on a job site through the cell phone, through apps running on cell phones with the workers. And if you have 10 workers all around one object, seeing it every second and telling your server every second, here it is, here it is, here it is, that's not scalable. You have a lot of redundant information. And so the solution to that was to push the intelligence down to the phone, have the server say, this is redundant, I don't need as much. Pushing down to the phone saying what to do to filter and modulate the amount of information coming in. And I think that third question is probably the most difficult and most interesting thing that's going to be worked on in the next few years.
Right, right. Great, thanks. John, coming back to the Trimble world, you lead the field service management division within Trimble, and you talked about the various sensors in the vehicles, but how has your business impacted over the years with this tremendous development that has happened in IoT in the last few years?
So one of the areas in which IoT is most applicable is in the servicing of capital assets. So the installation of sensors at the factory or even aftermarket have now enabled information to be available on the health of that capital asset, particularly ones that are mission critical that just can't go down. And this gives us the ability to to predict when we think that an unscheduled maintenance call might be warranted by a field service technician. And in this way, we are taking the industry from being one that is reactive in a break-fix model, responding to critical situations, to one that's more preemptive or predictive to allow when we could get there in order to avoid that catastrophic event. Now, field service excellence is usually measured on a rate of first-time fix and technician productivity. So we use sensors to determine where is the vehicle that the mobile field technician uses, what tools and raw materials are in that van in real time, and then this information allows Trimble Pulse, our solution, to the ability to send the closest qualified technician that has the correct parts and the right tools to the highest priority job that may have just surfaced. And then we're using a myriad of information from all kinds of sensors, community-based particularly. I'm sure you're all using Waze, that tell us what's the best route to direct that worker there. Our objective is to deliver to arrive in order to fix it the first time, and to do that quality of service every time.
Great. So this is primarily an entrepreneur-driven conference. Past entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, and I'm sure they're all thinking about where do they start, where do they begin, which market do they go after. So you have this myriad of consumer IoT solutions and enterprise IoT solution. Do you see these merging at some point, and what advice would you give to the audience here?
I think my number one piece of advice is don't decide. Do what I did and just do both. When I started Locus Pocus, for example, it was a device-agnostic Bluetooth tracking system. And I went after the consumer market. And what I found was that enterprises wanted to be able to do the same thing, but they needed an enterprise performant backend to do it. And so working on this tool tracking solution and already having a consumer solution, we had a situation where if a tool leaves a job site, and asset loss is a big problem in these situations, isn't it interesting that you can have a city full of people who have the app running, and they're just tracking their things for their own personal purpose, and this thing can see the tool, anonymously inform the enterprise. So in essence, we're merging the clouds together. The combinatorial explosion of possibilities of putting consumer and enterprise together in this way will allow people to negotiate the use of them and the use of the enterprise in the most optimal way. So there's no reason not to do both and to think about both at the same time.
Yeah, with that, I want to take a pause and see if there is any audience questions. Anybody with a question, please, there's a microphone here. Come up to the microphone. Anyone? I can't see anything from here with the light. Yes, please.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jayantra. I'm from Coimbatore from India. I run an IoT-based fleet management product company. My question is for both of you. In terms of real-time tracking of mobile assets, what are the kind of security concerns that the service provider should have to keep in mind? Because everything is on the cloud, and you might be providing solutions to competing organizations both on your own cloud. So the security concerns with respect to IoT provided from a cloud. Thanks.
We have an entire department within Trimble that is focused on that. Cybersecurity is something that we're engaged in continuously. It's amazing how many of the breaches that occur are due to human error. We're constantly running doing tests with a third party to try to breach our own systems, and we also take great pains to limit the kind of information that we even allow in to our solutions, that we even store. As we have to be very aware of the consequences of these data breaches, and I'm not going to be able to go in as a technical expert and describe all the specific technical barriers and firewalls, but you can't stand still. It just seems that we get apologetic emails from our senior leadership all the time for the so-called inconveniences imposed upon all of us with regards to changing our passwords, and the passwords get longer and more mixed characters, but it's everybody's job, and it's the minute we think we've solved it, they've come up with another way to get in.
And I can speak to the technical part of this in some respects, especially with location tracking. A large number of the activity trackers that you might be wearing on your wrist right now are uniquely identifiable without having to pair with it. You can actually just read a unique ID off of it. This is a problem. And in working with tracking these tools, for example, we had to troubleshoot and figure out ways to be able to be open enough to find these things, but closed enough so no one else could. And there are a lot of compromises in the technology right now that in some ways require a certain amount of openness. And there's always that tension between that openness and the benefits you get from it versus the security and the privacy issues. As things become more and more thought about, Google's coming up right now with a way to try to prevent people from reading the unique ID off of these beacon technologies. Things will become strong enough, resource rich enough that they'll be able to have security and still not drain their battery in 5 minutes. This is coming, but it's not here yet. As far as security overall within the cloud, that's the number one thing to look for when you look to work with a company is what value they place on trust and what their history is in terms of security with their system.
So John, you talked about this wide areas in which Trimble is playing in with IoT solutions. What's the one advice that you would give to a budding entrepreneur or a business leader from your vantage point?
Well, Trimble has been successful by going deep into identified vertical markets and gaining great domain knowledge and then using that to develop end-to-end solutions. I think of the Internet of Things reaching out, and you hear numbers like more than 20 billion assets out there, endpoints out there by the year 2020, and it would be easy to get lost in that. I think that my advice would be to focus your efforts on solving a particular problem and try to do it as thoroughly as you could. I've heard it said that the riches are in the niches, and one shouldn't try to boil the ocean.
Great. Okay, that's a great answer. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
When I first started at Salesforce, which was actually only about 6 months ago, I had the good fortune of meeting Peter Schwartz, the Hall of Fame futurist, and we actually made friends talking about Buddhism and consciousness. And that had nothing to do with technology. It had nothing to do with why I was at Salesforce. But that conversation led to other conversations, and eventually he invited me into the Futures Lab, which is an internal think tank, and we'll be partnering with customers soon to try to be the first to see the future, and the future being 5 years and more out. The thing that he and I both find most interesting right now, and I won't speak for him as much as me in this case, but the combination of big data and AI, being able to have a system learn your context and be able to help you make decisions in that context. are really the most interesting things that are happening right now. And any way of solving that problem, such as tracking devices, for example, you'll always have those questions come up. And so trying to find out when those questions come up, interesting ways to answer them and to make your answers more powerful.
Okay, I think we are running out of time. Did we get the audio here back at all? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, you can see this video if you go to the Trimble.com site, and you know, you saw the sort of video part. Maybe the audio would make it a little more interesting. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you all for attending the session. Please thank my panelists here. Wonderful, and they'll be around if you have more questions outside. Thank you.